When you're looking for a new game to play, it seems like the same 20 games get recommended over and over again in the community. Your brain's crying out for novelty, but your thumbs take you right back to whatever warhorse is giving you that reliable hit of satisfaction for your downtime. And anyway, how can you even find something new without tearing your hair out trying to parse out what's online groupthink and brigading versus actual legit criticism?
What the hell is going on out there?
As I'm sure you've seen, in store Xbox reviews can get just slammed for a whole variety of reasons, and who even knows what you can really trust. Is that interesting looking indie game 3 stars because it truly is mid, as the kids say? Or did the devs release some unpopular DLC or ability nerf that just made everyone go nuts? Well, this video is the first in a series where I'm going to show you some of my favorite games that I think don't get enough love. And sure, some of them may not be perfect or have the polish of an indie darling like a Hollow Knight or a Hades or something, but look, everyone already knows about those, and you're looking for something new to play. And if a game clicks with you in just the right way, somebody else's 6.5 just might be your 8. Just think of it like gaming beer goggles.
I'm just a little man. A little man.
First up, Outriders by the rather troubled developer People Can Fly. It's not as though this game's completely unheard of, because the studio estimates around 2 to 3 million copies were sold, but they only have an estimate because their relationship with their publisher, Square Enix, is so fraught that they didn't even share sales figures with them, and there was a whole falling out and it got pretty nasty. But besides that, this game has a lingering stink on it from a completely disastrous launch that had players unable to log in. There was broken crossplay, there was random crashes, lots of other game-breaking problems that persisted for a pretty shocking amount of time. So that whole experience, rightfully so, led the community's opinion and the aggregate user review scores to just plummet in a way that the title has never really recovered from. But today, the game's in a fairly good place, and the vast majority of those issues are totally cleaned up. But the reality is, players have moved on, and Outriders has just slipped out of gaming consciousness. But I think that's a bit of a shame, because the game's actually in a pretty fun spot. It's got solid, cover-based, third-person shooter mechanics, kind of like a fun but watered-down imitation of a Gears of War or The Division 2. Outriders combines the cover shooter mechanics of those games with elements you'd also find in Destiny 2 or a Borderlands game. So there's tons of loot, there's skill trees, and there's a post-game grind that has more and more difficult challenges. And this game is a total blast in co-op, and the amount of content in the game could easily stretch 150 hours or more if you find yourself really hooked. And then lastly, an interesting quirk of Outriders is that it's a quote-unquote finished game, not a live service. But the weird thing is that this is actually one of the few games that really should have been a live service game. All of the other pieces are there with the loot, the level scaling, the challenges, but the game really needed more endgame environments and endgame specific gear and extra structure to those endgame challenges. And to be fair, there was a really substantial DLC that added quite a bit there, but it just isn't enough to keep you going past 150, 200 hours, which is a lot, even if you really end up clicking with it. But until that point, if you like story-based looter shooters with cover mechanics and abilities, you kind of owe it to yourself to at least give Outriders a spin. This thing's on sale for pretty dirt cheap all the time. And yeah, I beat everything in this game, and no, I won't be coming back to play it ever again, but I enjoyed my time with it, enough to give this game the label a hidden gem. Even setting aside my bias as a huge turn-based tactics fan, King Arthur Knight's Tale is criminally underrated, or maybe just unknown. What is it? It's XCOM with medieval knights and wizards. Do you really need to know more than that? I mean, that sells itself. Okay, technically, this is probably best described as a TRPG, but the RPG elements are pretty light and they're more of the base building variety rather than like the fetch quest, wander around a map variety. The emphasis, which I absolutely love, is on the combat encounters themselves. That's like 90% of what you're going to do in this game. It's just pure IV drip of tactics combat, and it's awesome. Your main playable character is Sir Mordred, who was actually the nemesis of King Arthur in the original legend. So it's kind of a cool twist because you're the bad guy trying to take down the king. Now, King Arthur starts off slow, and the first couple of hours, especially, almost caused me to bail, which thankfully I didn't. But once the training wheels are off, this is as good of a tactical combat experience as you can find on Xbox. Full stop. Easily top three, in my opinion. There's a really strong amount of content here, and what I would argue is some pretty good replayability thanks to this morality system that locks certain playable characters and quests behind your choices. The game even offers a set of mini game puzzles that are based on the combat, but they have tighter rules and they're more challenging than the main game itself. The last thing I'll say here is that I'm not particularly a fan of fantasy settings. I find gaming in general to just be way oversaturated with this whole aesthetic and kind of turns me off. But King Arthur Knight's Tale takes a particularly dark and gritty spin on this whole thing. And for once, I actually didn't mind the setting. I loved all of the nods to the actual historical legend, and the game definitely has some pretty apparent love for the source material. To wrap this one up, let me just say it as clearly as I can. For my money, King Arthur Knight's Tale is one of the best hidden gems on Xbox. Hardcore survivor like aficionados definitely already know about this one, but if you were more of a casual Vampire Survivors player who maybe didn't click with the ugly aesthetic, but you liked the idea of the gameplay loop, you should definitely check out Army of Ruin. Like Vampire Survivors, it's a roguelike. You're going to walk around maps, you're going to auto attack, and you're going to fend off ever increasing hordes of enemies, all while collecting gems to level up and get stronger. But unlike Vampire Survivors, it has a level of polish, both visually and in its systems, that elevate the game just enough, I think, to appeal to gamers who couldn't quite get there with the OG of the genre. Army of Ruin offers tons of playable characters, permanent leveling, hundreds upon hundreds of unlocks, challenges, and much more. It's really a great game to play if you only have 15 minutes to kill, or if you want to listen to a podcast and just shut your brain off for a while. This is perfect. So if any of that sounds intriguing to you in the slightest, this is the tightest realization of this kind of game that I've come across on Xbox, and I easily recommend it. By now, you might really be noticing my strategy and turn based game slant, but Fights in Tight Spaces is a super underrated game from developer Ground Shatter, who also recently released the sequel, Knights in Tight Spaces, although that one's not on consoles just yet. This game leans more towards the puzzle side of tactics versus a true XCOM-like experience, and as the title suggests, the grid playing fields are of varying sizes, but they're all quite a bit smaller than you'd find in a real XCOM-like. The weirdest part about the game is that they've structured it as a roguelike deck builder, which is kind of whatever, and makes it actually almost closer to something like Marvel's Midnight Suns than a game like Gears Tactics. But you'll control just one playable character in this one, and you use one of several decks that you can choose, and they all enable different fighting styles. And throughout the game, you're going to take out a range of bad guys who all behave a little differently, different types of enemies there, and you're going to work your way through a Slay the Spire-esque roguelike run. So just like that game, you're going to add and remove cards from your deck on various waypoints, and there's a pretty good amount of flexibility in terms of the playstyle that you want to bring to overcome the game's challenges. Now, the game has some quirks, namely that the roguelike and deck building elements feel a little bit underbaked, and the UI elements are extremely bare bones, pretty ugly. It's almost as though they wanted to get the game out the door as soon as they had a solid gameplay foundation. But that's just the thing. Fights in Tight Spaces does have a very solid gameplay foundation, and if you like tactical puzzlers of any kind, you should definitely pick this one up. Super underrated. All right, last one here. And sometimes it just feels good to combine the mindlessness of an arcade shooter with the excruciating difficulty of, I don't know, trying to earn a PhD while being attacked by a swarm of murder hornets. Feels about right for this one. Well, that's exactly what Skyforce Reloaded has to offer. Although, to be fair, you don't have to engage with the most difficult challenges, but they are there for folks who really enjoy that. Now, in the shoot 'em up genre, there's a lot of purists out there who think that only the most insane bullet hell torture gauntlets are worthy of playing, and that a more accessible option like Skyforce is basically blasphemy. But for me, as a casual fan of the genre, I really loved the polished take on this kind of experience. It really eases you in before kicking you in the groin. They've added a bunch of collectibles, there's alternative planes to fly, there's challenges, there's persistent leveling, and I think that all adds some much needed depth to a genre whose most acclaimed games have really started to show their age. So, for better or worse, those things are in here, and for me, I don't think they dilute the purity of the experience. I think it adds to the fun, gives you a little bit more to wrap your arms around with the whole way that the game evolves as you play it. This game is a slam dunk hidden gem on Xbox. And there you have it. 5 hidden gems you can download right now on Xbox, and who knows, you might just find one of your cult classic favorites, or you might waste $10. Look, don't blame me if that happens. I'm just here to point you in the right direction. Did you also click with one of these, or did you give one a try after watching? Let me know what you think in the comments. And by the way, before you bounce, do me a solid and drop a subscribe and like. This channel is brand new.
I'm just a little man. A little man.
It's going to help me out a ton. Only takes a sec. Really appreciate it. And until next time, go find those gems.